Can you just tell us what it's been like for you for the past week, seeing and reading the responses from people?
Yeah, firstly, hi, good morning. And yeah, it's been just completely overwhelming. There's nothing else that we can say. I mean, this was something that, I approached the team about BBC Three about making, and everyone said to me at the time, is this too soon to make for you? And I used this as my own therapy because, Joe and I, what we did for a living was make content that makes people laugh, and I knew that I wanted to do this kind of almost felt like one last project together to try and make some form of difference. And yeah, seeing the response, seeing the kind of fallout from it, and seeing how much people are now starting a conversation and taking things from the documentary into their own lives is again just completely and utterly overwhelming.
And there are two key things to this story. There's one, trying to understand Joe and where he was and how it came that he was in this position, but none of his close friends knew. And then there's your own sort of mental health experiences too. But I think that opening sequence where you talk us through what happened with Joe, and that none of you who were really close to him had any idea. You've been playing football with him just a few days before. You would share stuff presumably all the time, presumably quite intimate stuff, but you had absolutely no sense of what he was going through.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly it. And that's one of the horrible things with suicide is you are left with so many questions. You're left with so many emotions that come from it. And, as Joe's mum, Celia, beautifully put, when someone takes their own life, the pain that they feel in that moment doesn't end. It gets passed on to the people that are left behind. And I guess that what we wanted to do was, I was so angry at why was I constantly hearing that, oh, it's the last person that you expect that is suffering. And when does the last person that you expect become the person that you most expect? I think there is still a massive stigmatism around what people perceive as a depressed person, and that's why I felt it was important to open up about my own things. I was like, look, I couldn't see it in Joe, but yet, all of the nation, if we wake them up in the morning on the radio, they think I'm this super upbeat person, but it's like, look, I go through those moments too. And depression doesn't wear a uniform anymore. And that's why it's okay to go and get help if you have those down moments. It's okay if a doctor recommends you take a antidepressant, or if a doctor recommends you take therapy. Those are things that are completely natural and completely normal.
Roman, this is an issue the statistics show that particularly affects young men. What is it, do you think, about blokes, young blokes in the prime of life, which makes it so difficult to reach out and talk and share?
Well, do you know what? I think that, again, the main thing that I was so kind of fixated on showing was as you said there, this is about young men, but I wouldn't even call them men. I would say it's children. We're talking about kids from the age of 14 taking their own lives, and that to me is just so shocking, and something that parents should be aware of. I do believe that in some way, shape or form, I think that from the age of 16, I think a guy, and I can only speak from my own perspective, I think that a guy will have made a conscious decision whether or not they're going to open up and how much they open up to their friends. So that's why it's so important. And that's why, I wanted to go and do the research with the professors to work out, if you get in early, if schools get in early from the ages of 5 to teach boys how to open up, what things like depression are, what tools they can use. If you teach them from the age of 5, then by the age of 16, they're open to everything. And that's what's important.
That process of opening up is something, as you say, you have done. And we just want to show another clip from the film where you're speaking to your mum,
Sure.
Shirley, about depression and her own concerns.
Maybe they feel guilty that even suggesting it. And I did have a battle. I remember saying to Dad, I think Ron suffers depression. And it wasn't that you suffer depression because your life was bad. I think it's a chemical thing with you. That's what I saw in you. I saw mood swings. You just withdrew.
Although I speak to her about everything, I've never explained fully about how bad it got that day. I think that's because I didn't want to worry her. But now I'm thinking that this sort of stuff can't be a taboo.
Are there times where you've seen me in such a state where you're worried at all?
Yeah, you've put me through quite a few of those.
Yeah.
So Roman, just looking back on that, that was one of the first times you'd really had an in-depth conversation with your mum about that and what you've been through, what you've been experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, my mum's always been there for me. My mum has been my hero, you know, and she's been the person that she knows that I struggle a lot, and you know, she knows that, and she's always there for me. She's always the first person to notice it, and it's a tough one because, you know, you never want to scare her. There was one moment in particular that did get really bad, and I didn't tell her how bad it had gotten, and I thought it was important in that moment to tell her just how bad it was. And, you know, she is always there, and it keeps coming back to that conversation, you know, because it's so hard for someone when you're in that moment, when you're, no matter how old you are, you could be a 13-year-old boy watching this, and you can agree that when you're in that moment, when you're so low, for guys and girls, the hardest thing to do is talk. And it used to almost frustrate me when I used to get told, if you're struggling, talk, because it's the hardest thing. So what needs to happen is the onus needs to get placed not on the person that is suffering, it needs to get placed on the people around them. And I was lucky that I had that person who was willing to take that pressure in my mum. You know, my mum became my hero. And what I keep saying is I want people to watch this documentary and want to be the hero to their friends that I genuinely felt like I wasn't to Joe, because I didn't see it, and I didn't ask, and I didn't push enough.
Roman, thanks so much for sharing with us this morning, and of course through the documentary, which is clearly having a huge amount of resonance with a lot of people, especially young people, and it's going to make a big difference. So thank you so much for your time. All the best to you. And if you haven't seen it yet, you can watch Roman's documentary. It's called Our Silent Emergency, and you can watch it on the BBC iPlayer.
And details of organisations offering information and support with mental health issues, loads of them are available at bbc.co.uk/actionline. Do go there if you feel you need any kind of help or advice. You can call for free at any time to hear recorded information on 0800 888 809. Now,
those issues that Roman's talking